Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Courtney Yaki, and I'm with the F&M Regional Growth Alliance, and here today representing the Business Navigator Alliance of South Central and Southeastern Illinois. We have an excellent presentation in store for you. Today, we're diving into the topic of manufacturing and the crucial role it plays in our regional economy. This is in recognition to the upcoming National Manufacturing Day, which is on October 6th, next week. And the state of Illinois also celebrates manufacturing the entire month of October. We have an excellent panel to help guide us through today's discussion. Join us today is Angela Griffin, president of Coals Together, and Zach Kennedy, the extension specialist in community and economic development for the University of Illinois Extension. But before we get started, what is the Business Navigator Alliance of South Central and Southeastern Illinois? Well, we are a six-county regional collaboration working through a small business community navigator grant. Off to the side, you can see our partners, which are Angela Griffin from Coals Together, Lori Miner from the Sullivan, Illinois Chamber and Economic Development, Risa Shaner with the Crawford County Development Association, Nora Swalls with the Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce, Bob Colvin and Freddie Schmitty with the Paris Economic Development Corporation, and then myself, Courtney Yaki, with the F&M Regional Growth Alliance. This group is charged with professional outreach and technical assistance for local, state, and federal programs. Our mission is to ensure that small businesses in our region are competitive in applying for necessary resources, and our goal is to position you for success by accelerating business recovery and growth. See the map to the side of your screen for where the Business Navigator Alliance is located. Today's webinar is part of a series of business webinars that we're hosting each month. These webinars are typically scheduled for the last Thursday of each month, so please do mark your calendars. Visit www.ilbusinessnavigators.com and sign up for our newsletter to stay informed. We also host various outreach events, office hours, and offer one-on-one technical assistance. Again, visit ilbusinessnavigators.com to learn more. We will post a copy of the recording from today's presentation and additional supportive material on the website as well. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you will receive a short 5-question survey. We hope that you complete the survey. We'd love to hear your feedback on making improvements and to the future topics of these webinars. Up first today, we have Angela Griffin. Angela is the president and CEO of Coals Together, the economic development organization for Coles County. Griffin has a BA in economics from the University of Illinois at Springfield and 32 years of experience in economic development, including working for the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity before joining Coals Together in 2004. At DCO, Griffin held various positions, including assistant to the director, manager of government relations, financial analysis, and marketing specialist. As president of Coals Together, Griffin is responsible for the management, direction, and fiscal stability of the countywide economic development organization with a focus on manufacturing and the industrial sector. Griffin serves as the administrator of the Coles County Enterprise Zone and on the board of the Coles County Airport Authority, the Coles County Community Development Corporation, Elevate, which is the region's incubator and co-working space, and served on the board of the Illinois Economic Development Association, including as chair. She has also completed terms on the Sarah Bush Lincoln Health System's Healthy Communities Board, the Charleston Carnegie Library Board, the board of the Eastern Illinois Railroad Company, and the Salvation Army Board as well. Angela is a member of the Business Navigator Alliance. She's one of our own. We're very pleased to have her not only participate with BNA, but to present for us today. Angela, are you ready to present?
I am. Thank you. And thanks for that intro. And it reminds me, boy, I think I need to cut my bio back. That just makes me sound old with all that history there. I'm sorry you guys had to sit through that. Anyway, good morning to everyone on the webinar. We're happy that you joined us today as we kick off National Manufacturing Month, which, as Courtney mentioned, officially starts October 1st. I think many of us are participating in various events that celebrate manufacturing, including Manufacturing Day for our high school students and other events. So we're looking forward to a busy October celebrating manufacturing. Today, we're pleased to be able to present new manufacturing opportunities that we are pursuing in the region. As Courtney mentioned, I'm with Coals Together. Our primary focus at Coals Together is a little bit unique in that we are charged with really only focusing on the manufacturing and industrial sector. But during the pandemic, as it became clear that we all needed to work together and all sectors were struggling, I was proud to be able to begin working alongside my community navigator colleagues in Edgar, Effingham, Moultrie, Crawford, and Clark County on initiatives that benefited all sectors. And what we decided to do was take that collaboration and do something different with it that could take us to new frontiers in manufacturing, because we all know that manufacturing is a critical industry throughout the 6-county region. And Zach, who's going to present next, will share specific data about the impact of manufacturing in our 6 counties. Next slide. So why is the Navigator Group doing this? As I mentioned, we learned during the pandemic that regional collaboration was essential for recovery as we came out of the pandemic. We formed our Navigator Group, we began working together, and we learned that we could leverage more resources, offer more services, and use our collective reach to help businesses emerge stronger from the pandemic. So with this initiative, we want to take that model, the professional relationships that we've built, and the collaboration that we formed to the next level and make our 6-county region even more competitive. We're hoping that we are introducing a sector that not many businesses are currently participating in, and that by doing that, it's going to help build resiliency and insulation in our region in the event that there's another national or global event that triggers an economic downturn, or if one sector struggles. Hopefully we've built some resiliency into our region where we can come through that unscathed. Next slide. So what exactly are we doing? We are developing a program that will assist our businesses, researchers, manufacturers in doing business with NASA, with the Air Force, with the Department of Defense, and other federal agencies in aviation and aerospace. Specifically, we want to train businesses that are interested in how to access contract and procurement opportunities with these entities. We all know, and we learned through a grant application that we submitted, that doing business with the federal government has barriers to entry. And that may start with not even knowing where to look for opportunities or how to get the proper credentials to do business with the federal government. So we want to take the mystery out of that process, provide guidance and training in the basics of government contracting and getting the credentials and the clearances needed, and then link our businesses with the procurement offices and the contracting entities at NASA, the Air Force, the Department of Defense, and create networking opportunities where we bring individuals from those agencies on site to our businesses, and then take our business leaders to the organizations that we're working with in Ohio. And all of this in an effort to equip businesses so that they can find and win contracts. Which takes us to the next slide, please. So how are we doing this? Well, first of all, that collaboration I mentioned paid off when, as a group, our regional partnership applied for and received a $150,000 RISE grant. And RISE stands for Research in Illinois to Spur Economic Recovery. And that's the stage that we're in now, phase 1, research, where we are using those grant funds to do the research and outreach in our communities to discover what businesses are already operating in this sector, what are they producing or manufacturing, what services or research maybe they are already providing, and then what's the interest level and the capacity for other businesses to break into this sector. So besides the regional navigator group of these 6 counties, we're working, as I mentioned, with some partners in Ohio at the Ohio Aerospace Institute and Parallax, which are both in Cleveland. Those entities are not-for-profits, and it's their job to connect the aerospace and aviation industry with new supply chains in the United States. And they've introduced us to procurement and contracting offices at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. And they will work with us as we move into phase 2 of this initiative, where we want to begin training companies in how to do business with these entities. Another partner is the Development Consortium, which is a private consulting group that we've contracted with that's going to do and has started doing the outreach and the survey portion of the research. This group is contacting businesses in our 6-county region to discover what's the current capacity, what's the potential capacity, what's the interest, and what kind of activity is already going on in this sector. Next slide, please. So the timeline for our project starts with data collection, which is currently underway. As I mentioned, some of you may have already been contacted by either Craig Coyle or Janet Mathis with the Development Consortium. We hope to complete that effort within the next 4 weeks and then immediately convene our group with our Ohio partners to put together a report that will detail what we learned and what our plan is for the next phase. We will share that report with all of you, with our communities, and with the state when we apply for phase 2 funding to implement the training and the networking portion of this initiative. And we hope to apply for that funding as soon as the state issues the NOFO, which I anticipate may be the end of this year or just after the beginning of next year. Next slide. So at the conclusion of this, we hope that we've been able to facilitate participation by businesses in our region with the aviation and aerospace sectors, which have historically been high value sectors. They're generally recession proof. And in so doing, we hope that we can provide sophisticated manufacturing careers for all of our citizens, and that it opens opportunities beyond just manufacturing. I know our focus today is on manufacturing, and the Ohio partners are focused on manufacturing today as well, because as I said, their job is to grow those supply chains to NASA, to the Air Force, to the Department of Defense. But that may also include small research firms in our counties, small businesses, service providers, and businesses that we just didn't realize were out there until we did this research. And so I will turn it over to Zach so that he can tell all of you how important manufacturing is in our 6-county region and has the data and the statistics to back it up.
Excellent presentation, Angela. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to have you educate us and let the South Central, Southeastern Illinois know the initiatives, the regional initiatives that the Business Navigator Alliance as a group is working towards, and really glad that you did elaborate there of it's not just manufacturing businesses. It's all the upchain and downchain of the value streams that those businesses have, and the suppliers, the research and demand, the additional auxiliary businesses that can also take advantage of this opportunity or would benefit from it, and how the economy as a whole can definitely continue to grow and prosper. So excellent presentation. Thank you for presenting to us. Up next, we have Zach Kennedy. Zach is an extension specialist in community and economic development with statewide responsibilities for Illinois Extension. He is an economist and urban planner by educational background, having earned bachelor's and master's degrees from University of Illinois. He has nearly 15 years of experience in helping communities and regional development plans, including economic development plans. Zach has had formal training as a facilitator. Additionally, he is highly skilled in working with demographic and economic data sets, as well as spatial data analysis and mapping using geographic information system software, or GIS, if you will. He is a proponent of data-informed decision-making and has had a large amount of experience in explaining demographics and economic data to lay audiences. Zach recently brought the Illinois State Census Data Center, the ISCDC, to Illinois Extension, where he serves as the center lead. The ISCDC will produce data products and trainings and act as the main liaison between the state census data users and the U.S. Census Bureau. Zach is backed by popular demand. He had participated and was our presenter in the Data for Decision Makers webinar that we hosted earlier this year. Very much looking forward to what he has for us today, and thankful for his willingness to present to us again. Zach, are you prepared to present, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, thank you, Courtney, for this opportunity. Thank you, Angela, for shedding some light on what's going on with regards to developing the aerospace industry within the region. And thank you all for attending today and to listen to the comments. We appreciate your attendance. Next slide, please, Courtney. So today we're going to look at some data just around what the numbers look like regarding the manufacturing sector within the region. Courtney and Angela had mentioned that the 6-county region, that's the Business Navigator Alliance. However, for purposes of analysis, we went ahead and included Cumberland County to make it a contiguous region, so that it's actually a region with boundaries that sort of make sense, and it's not just Effingham over by itself with the other counties for the purpose of this analysis. So this analysis will be focusing on the 7 counties that you see displayed here on your screen. So when we talk about regional figures, these are the 7 counties that we're referring to in this presentation. Next slide, please, Courtney. So just at the very most basic, we can look at 2-digit or the broadest industry classifications and see the level of employment in each of them. And what we notice here is that manufacturing is actually the largest employing sector within the 7-county region, which is actually quite unusual. 13,430 is the estimate according to Jobs EQ. And just for folks that aren't familiar with Jobs EQ, it's a group that it is a set of data that is produced by a company called Comora. And they're basically, that's what they specialize in, is creating economic data sets. And they're using a lot of Bureau of Labor Statistics, some census data, some data from Data Axle, various different data sources to compile and collate their estimates and produce those. And so we have a subscription to this service at Extension. And so we rely pretty heavily on this to give us some more timely data about what's happening in particular industries. But the key takeaway here is that manufacturing is the largest employing sector within the 7-county region, again, accounting for 13,430 jobs, followed by healthcare and social assistance at 13,164, and then it sort of falls all the way down to 8,444 for retail trade. And then the rest of the 2-digit NAICS sectors are shown here in descending order with regard to how many jobs each of them provides to the regional economy. And the vintage of these numbers are Q1 of 2023 estimates. So there's always a little bit of a lag whenever you're looking at economic data sets. Because it takes time for the BLS and the other producers of this data to intake new data sets, prep those, and then produce their estimates. So that's why we see a little bit of a lag on that. But what's nice about Chamorro versus some of the federal statistical resources is that lag time is a little bit shorter. So we're not looking at data from last year. We're just looking at data from a couple of quarters ago. That's very helpful to have. Next slide, please. And so this slide here, instead of just looking at, the 2-digit industries and whole, all the 2-digit industries, this is doing a little bit of a deeper dive specifically on the manufacturing sector. And what this is, it's showing the top 4-digit manufacturing industries by employment in the region. And so Those who aren't familiar with the NAICS classification system, the more digits that are included, the narrower the industry you're looking at. And so 4 digits is sort of an intermediary level of looking at the economy. And we can look and see specifically how those 13,440 jobs in the manufacturing industry break out as with regard to which sub-industries within manufacturing do they fall into. And so what we see is that household and institutional furniture and kitchen cabinet manufacturing is the largest employer within the region, employing 1,847 individuals. Then we also have information on what the current average annual wage is. And again, this is an average, not a median. So we're not lining the wages up and then picking the middle one. We're actually summing them all up and dividing through by the number of employees. Sometimes you see median figures given, and sometimes you just see straight means, and this is a mean figure. We also have a location quotient, which basically shows how specialized you are in a given industry. A location quotient of 1 would mean that the proportion of jobs in a given industry matches the proportion of jobs in that industry at the national level. And so where we see a location quotient greater than 1, it means that there are proportionally more jobs represented in that sector in the region than there are at the nation. Or in other words, we see about 15 times more jobs in household and institutional furniture and kitchen cabinet manufacturing within the 7-county region than we would expect if the sort of distribution of employment in the region matched that of the nation. And then we have an employment change figure over the 5-year, looking at a 5-year history and seeing what's just been the aggregate change in the number of employees in a given subsector. And then that's annualized as well. And so what we see is that, again, that household, institutional furniture and kitchen, and then it's followed by motor vehicle parts manufacturing being another huge 4-digit manufacturing industry within the region. Printing and related support activities, plastic products and manufacturing. But interestingly, at number 5, we see aerospace products and parts manufacturing, which suggests that there is, this sort of baseline skill set and workforce within this industry, which hopefully can be developed per, what Angela had talked about in her presentation, with this being a targeted industry for growth within the region and doing some supply chain development and doing those activities that'll make these businesses able to secure some of those government contracts. So that to say, there are already 736 individuals who may have skills that can help increase the presence of this sub-industry within the region. And then you have got the rest of the 4-digit industries sort of in a descending order in terms of employment displayed throughout the slide. I won't belabor the point, but the structure of the table is the same. You can just look across and see the employment, the wages, location quotient, and the employment change over the previous 5 years. Next slide, please.
And quickly, before we go to the next slide, going back to LQ and just noting that through this whole list that you have, there's a lot that are right above 1 or significantly higher above that designation of 1, which would be equal across the U.S. as a whole. And understandable that this is employment by industry, but would you consider having a number above 1 or significantly higher above 1 as a competitive advantage, or what is the advantage of having that?
Yeah, so certainly you can, things like agglomerative effects, where businesses that are in manufacturing have a common workforce that they're sharing typically. There's also the supply chain linkages that can occur when you have agglomerations and you have specializations and you have an industry with a location quotient greater than 1. So there are some good effects that can it's sort of like a rising tide lifts all ships situation in some cases, where you have the flexibility of having a workforce that's skilled in manufacturing, and so businesses can tap on that. And again, you have the opportunity to do some supply chain sort of integration within the region, because you have this agglomeration and you have these different types of manufacturing businesses happening. And not to put too fine a point on it, but when we look at the 2-digit level, the overall aggregate location quotient for manufacturing in the region is 2.09. So in other words, you have double the number of manufacturing jobs than we would expect to see if the proportion of manufacturing jobs within the region matched that of the nation.
That's
Excellent
awesome
question, Courtney. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next slide, please. And so, yeah, this is just, again, looking at sort of a graphical representation. The gray squiggly on the top of the screen sort of show the trend over time quarterly between 2002 and 2023. On the left, we're looking at employment. So you'll notice we have the big dip around the 2008, 2009 Great Recession. And then again, we see another dip around COVID times. Overall, again, it's 13,430. You can compare that with 13 million at the national level. The average annual change over the last 10 years, or in other words, in the percentage of new jobs that are added per year, is 0.1%. So we see 0.1% year over year growth, or we have over the last 10 years in employment within manufacturing within the 7-county region. Now, that didn't quite keep pace with what happened on the national level, whereas on the national level, we saw 0.7% year over year growth within manufacturing. But again, it could be it shouldn't be underestimated that it's harder the higher your location quotient, the more specialized you are. Adding, that marginal one more job can be significantly difficult. And so, again, to sort of look at the location quotient in a different way, we can say that 16.9% of the region's employment is within the manufacturing sector. And you compare that to the US total at 8.1%. And so when we divide those through, that's how we derive that location quotient of 2.09. And then on the other side, we have the wages, which, if you look at the graph at the top, they've kind of grown steadily over the years within the manufacturing sector. And again, looking at that mean figure across all manufacturing within the region, we see that the average annual wage is 61,579. Which is a little bit lower than the national average of 79,421. But you also have to take in consideration that the regional cost of living within the 7 counties is lower than that of the national. So your buying power with 61,579 within the region may actually be greater than 79,000 would be at a national average sort of a level. And then also, if we look at the wage growth over time, we see that the regional wage growth within manufacturing actually outstripped that of the national. So we added an average of 3.1% to that wage figure in manufacturing per year, year over the last 10 years within the manufacturing sector, whereas it was only 2.9%. So it's pretty comparable to the US, but you were slightly higher within the region as far as wage growth over the past 10 years. Next slide, please. And so here we're sort of looking at the occupational staffing pattern within the manufacturing sector. And the mix of occupations sort of points to the ability of a region to support an industry and its flexibility to adapt to future demand. And then we also have, again, the wages, and industry wages are a component of the cost of labor for regional employers, as we all know. But this is basically saying within the manufacturing sector, what are the actual occupations that folks are typically doing? And, 51.4% of the occupations are, production related occupations, which is unsurprising. It's going to be the largest sort of set of activities that we would associate with, a manufacturing industry. But then we also have things like transportation and material moving, which, is logistics. You got to get the widgets and goods that you produce to market. And so there are some activities, obviously, to support that. And then office and administrative support. So obviously we have to have people running the businesses and making sure that all the bills are paid and things of that nature. Architecture and engineering. So designing new plants, designing new manufacturing line layouts, this sort of a thing. That's a collection of activities that typically we would see within this occupation, within this industry. And again, to contrast occupational employment and industrial employment, industrial employment looks at sort of what do we make? That's sort of a shorthand way of thinking about it. Whereas occupational employment kind of looks at what does a person do? So we can have the same type of occupation across different industries. For instance, we would see office and administrative support across a variety of different industries. And so this is really kind of looking at two slices of the manufacturing sector, one in, and how the occupations sort of slot into this sector. And then we have on the table, sort of in descending order, what those different occupations are at a 6-digit level. The employment levels, the average annual wages, and the annual demand are the new positions that we would see on an annual basis. This doesn't also include the reduction, so this is not a net figure, but this is just new openings within each of these occupations. with regard to the industrial sector. Hopefully that makes sense. Next slide, please. And here we're just looking at the geographic distribution of industry employment by place of work. And this sort of illustrates the impact on labor force demand and it can, say something about the commuting patterns possibly. And so what we have here is just listed in descending order the number of employees within the manufacturing industrial sector by county. So Effingham County has the largest number of manufacturing employees at 3,377. Edgar, 2,673, and it kind of goes on down the list, with Cumberland having the fewest at 699. And so the darker blue the county is displayed in the map, the higher or larger the number of employees there are within the manufacturing sector. Next slide, please. And so this is looking at establishments. So looking at employees is one way to look at, sort of the health or take a snapshot of the industrial sector, but we also can look at the number of establishments. So in 2022, there were 209 manufacturing establishments in the region. And then that was a decrease actually in the establishment account from 2012, where there were 236. But because we didn't see too drastic a decrease in the actual employment levels, it would suggest that the businesses that do remain are actually employing more individuals in 2022 than they were in 2012. So the size of a business as measured by number of employees is growing within the sector, which can be kind of counterintuitive because we see this graph going down. But again, remember, it's equal, about even number of employees, fewer businesses means that per business there are more employees. Next slide, please. And so this is looking at the manufacturing industry, gross domestic product and productivity. And so gross domestic product is one of the most comprehensive measures of a regional economic activity. And it sort of measures an industry's contribution in the terms of the total value of goods and services in the form of labor income, proprietor's income, and business profits. And GDP values that are shown here are nominal values. And so what we saw is that in the green bar is showing the US GDP, and the blue is showing the regional GDP within the manufacturing sector. So unfortunately, the region hasn't quite been doing as well in terms of this just nominal GDP measure when compared to the nation. This is indexed to 2012, would be a value of 100. And so basically this is saying that, the US manufacturing sector went up to 140 or grew by 40% in terms of GDP between 2012 and 2022, whereas there was a little bit of a shrinking in terms of GDP for the region between that 2012 and 2022. But even though the GDP has not grown at the same rate as national GDP in manufacturing, it's important to note that 26.5% of the total GDP across all industries within the region can be attributed to manufacturing. Or in other words, manufacturing accounts for 26.5% of the final value of goods and services produced within the 7-county region. And that's, compared to 10.8% within the nation. So manufacturing accounts for 10.8% of the national economy, and it accounts for 26.5% of the regional economy. So again, showing how important manufacturing really is within the 7-county region. On an average annual, change. So if we take, we extrapolate what we see with the line graph, basically we've lost 1.1% GDP year over year over the last 10 years within manufacturing in the region, whereas the nation grew 3.5%. However, the output per worker, so the measure of productivity, does show favorable characteristics for the regional economy, where each worker is responsible for producing about $905,000 worth of output, which is significantly higher than the national average of $635,000 per worker within the manufacturing sector. So we have highly productive workers within the region, within the manufacturing sector. And growth in productivity and output per worker leads to increases in wealth and higher average standards of living within a region. So that's kind of why we care about that figure and why we measure output. Next slide, please. So this is sort of looking at supply chain. And so basically this is the top suppliers to the manufacturing sector within the region. So as of Q1 of 2023, manufacturing in the Business Navigator Alliance region are estimated to make about 8 billion in annual purchases from suppliers throughout the United States, with about 11% or 900 million dollars of those purchases being made within the region. So this is basically saying of the requirements to produce all the goods and services that are produced by the manufacturers within the region, how much of those supplies are being purchased inside the region versus how much are being imported. And then it's giving you what type of inputs manufacturers are buying. So manufacturers are buying $560 million from other manufacturing businesses within the region as inputs in their production activities, whereas they're buying $2.1 billion worth of products and services from outside the region in order to meet their the requirements for production within the region. And then it just sort of goes down the list as far as other industries that provide either goods or services to support the production of the manufacturing industry. So manufacturing is buying $69.3 million worth of mining, quarrying, oil and gas products from other suppliers within the region, and they're importing 2.4 billion. Some of these inputs can be locally developed so that you have more of a vertical integration of a supply chain within the region, and some are going to be more difficult. So this mining, quarry, oil and gas extraction is going to be difficult to internalize, just because there's not a lot of fuel production or oil production that happens in the region. But so other things like professional and scientific and technical services, some of your finance and insurance activities, those could be brought within the region. And there is the opportunity to do some more vertical supply chain integration and capture those dollars in the region. And the reason why we care about that is that the more dollars we can keep in the region and keep circulating has multiplier effects. I'm sure you all have heard of the multiplier effect, but it supports additional jobs and allows the dollars to circulate through the regional economy. And so really looking at opportunities to bring supply chain linkages within the region can have immediate effects on the businesses, and it can have secondary and tertiary effects with regard to induced spending, additional incomes that then trickle down into other businesses that aren't even related to manufacturing. So that's why we care about supply chain. This speaks to what Angela was talking about this in her presentation with regard to developing supply chain linkages within the region, particularly in aerospace, but there's the opportunity to do this in other sectors as well. Angela, do you have...
I'm going to just jump in and add right now. I mean, look at all of us on this call as presenters. We are part of that. Additional jobs, spin-off jobs, and some of us more than others in terms of what portion of our day is spent servicing the manufacturing sector. But there are positions and jobs and careers that one wouldn't even think about necessarily when they first think about the manufacturing sector.
Great point. Yeah, that sort of illustrates that it's not just directly manufacturing jobs, but there's all these other jobs that are supported by the industry. Next slide, please. And so this is looking at a little bit of the workforce development considerations with regard to manufacturing related post-secondary programs within the region. So you have Eastern Illinois that's conferred degrees in engineering related technologies that often are requirements for manufacturing. Excuse me. There's also industrial technology and technicians degrees that are being conferred by Eastern Illinois that may add to the workforce to support manufacturing within the region. Lakeland College has a lot of the construction trades programs. You have things like welding technology. So this just gives the awards are showing on an annual, looking at the previous year, how many credentials were given in these different programs that are related to manufacturing and may provide a workforce base for the manufacturing sector within the region. But that's not to say that we can't draw also manufacturing workers from other surrounding regions as well. And then you have, other sort of spillover effects that I talked about, where if you're drawing a workforce from outside the region, those folks may be purchasing fuel within your region. And so there's this other secondary economic stimuli and effects that can happen by drawing a workforce from a wider region. And given how large the manufacturing sector within the region is, I'm sure a lot of the demand for labor is being met by folks commuting in as well. It's not just folks that are living within the 7 counties that are holding of those 13,440 jobs. Yep, next slide, please. Courtney, you unmuted yourself. Did you have a comment, sir?
Yeah, just about the programs, the education here, and what you identified as just those that are currently available within the 7-county region. Is that correct? For
Correct.
what's on the slide, and just to give notes of the other sources to be able to acquire a workforce from, with University of Illinois, SIU E, SIU Carbondale, Purdue, Rose-Hulman, a lot of CTEC programs, a lot of industrial maintenance programs and technical centers, and just very thankful for you diving into the region here. But I think there's a well understanding from the Business Navigator Alliance, and then I would venture to say with the those that are in attendance of today's webinar, or maybe viewing the recording of this, that our workforce does come from a larger area, and especially when seeking that talent. Yep.
Thanks for reiterating that point. Yeah, this is not to say that this is all you're limited to, because you can draw workers with skills that are required and that manufacturing type businesses are looking for from a wider region or from a wider area. Next slide, please. Yep, that was the end of it. I know that was a lot of data, and that's not everyone's cup of tea. So hopefully you gleaned something interesting from that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. If anyone wants to see a similar analysis just for their own county, I can do that. Send me an email. I'd be happy to rerun a report that just narrows in on your specific county. Hopefully we're thinking regionally though, right? Because you're sort of in it together, and you do have this agglomeration of manufacturing that's happening across the regions. And so to the extent we can think regionally and not be in competition with one another, it's going to just help everyone out as you sort of develop, further develop this important sector within the region.
Thank you, Zach. Much appreciate the presentation. I love the data. And to clarify, you had noted, go ahead and reach out to you if you're looking for something at the county level, something very similar to the data that you presented here for the regional level. And then I would assume other data sets as well, if somebody has questions or seeking information. Is that
Absolutely.
true?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to just be restricted to the manufacturing sector. If there are other industrial sectors you're interested in, we can take a look at that. And then of course we have sources with regard to demographic data. So things, to do with population. And then, those two things are linked. Obviously the workforce demographics are going to affect, with industrial development and vice versa. So I'm happy to look at any of those data points. Again, I like data informed decision making. I say that the data is never the conversation ender, rather it should be the conversation starter. You all have to contextualize this information and decide whether you think the numbers are what they mean really for your region, or why the numbers look like they do for your region. So we always consider the data piece in concert with local knowledge. It's not one or the other. You need both to really have an informed, to make plans and have an informed decision-making sort of framework.
Oh, well put, sir, and definitely concur with you. The utilization of data to make educated decisions to help tell your story. If you don't tell your story, somebody else will, and you need to have the information, the substance behind that to prove it and to continue to move forward on whatever initiatives that you have. So, Zach, we're very appreciative of the opportunity to have you rejoin us for a second time this year. Always love your data presentations, very thorough, and looking forward to listening to the recording of this and going back and diving into those data points and those data sets more. So at this point here, we will enter the Q&A session of our section of our webinar. Just as a friendly reminder, quick reminder, a copy of the recording of this webinar will be posted on the ilbusinessnavigators.com, navigators with an S, website, along with a copy of the presentation, any supplementary materials to be added to it as well. So if you've got to jet out, I know we've got about 15 minutes left, but if you got to jet out or something and can't catch the Q&A section, it will be on there. webinar. If you have any questions, do throw them in the chat. Some people have emailed me questions. Some people text me questions. We got a chat box here. Go ahead and place them there as well. Very thankful for the ones that have come in. And I'll start with Angela first. And Angela, really kind of two questions I think we can put together. The first question was, how does the Economic Development Group, AKA the Business Navigator Alliance, spark the untapped potential in existing manufacturers? And then how did the Business Navigator Alliance, effectively choose or land on the aerospace industry to try to introduce or boost into the area?
Well, to answer the first question, I think if I understand it correctly, it's how do we look at our existing manufacturers and spark additional opportunities for production for them?
Yes, ma'am.
So I think that is the way that we do that is, first of all, collecting the data to know what they're doing. That's important. And we know that there are some manufacturers in our region that are involved with government contracting in aviation and aerospace. And so are they making things currently that could be tweaked to provide support for aerospace if they're currently working, for instance, with the Air Force or with the Navy? Are there products they're producing that might be able to support another branch in aviation and aerospace? Are there opportunities for companies that might be producing, for instance, a knuckle for a brake for automobiles that could retool that line or add a line and make a knuckle for a brake for an aircraft? So I think that's what we want to do with the data, is find out what they're doing, what they're making, what the talent is in their facility. And that's why we want to work so closely with our partners in Ohio, because then we can pour over that data with them and they can say, oh, well, we know that NASA, for instance, is looking for, a supplier in this particular component. And that manufacturer is producing a similar component. Can we talk to them about adding production? That's the first answer.
Yes.
The second answer is,
and just to maybe even compliment you there, not to jump on you there, I love it. The opportunity for business retention, expansion, and then recruitment in the area too, and really adhering to our existing businesses on what are they already participating in this industry, or what do they already do, and have a quick retool or pivot to be able to expand those services and be able to expand those product offerings, and hopefully not only the retention of the existing workforce, but maybe add to that workforce as well with the addition of more employment opportunities. So love the way that this is going and the path forward that we are on here for introducing this industry to South Central, Southeastern Illinois. But not to jump on you there, but please continue. So how did we choose this industry? Yeah, go ahead.
No, that brings up another thought, and something that I didn't mention in my presentation was, we know that there are businesses at all levels of participation, some who have said, oh my God, I never want to work with the government, and others who already are. So, we'll be hopefully providing different levels of service depending on what level of engagement those companies already have or don't have. We know, for instance, that there's a electrical conduit company that provides parts to the Navy. We know that there's a company that provides storage containers to the Air Force. So they've already made it through that first, barrier of getting themselves the credentials and knowing how to interact, and maybe knowing how to find subcontracts. Maybe they don't have a prime contract, and we can open up an opportunity for them to have a prime contract. So we hope that we can provide levels of service for all levels of engagement that exist now. And then the second question, we had these partners in Ohio, particularly at the Ohio Aerospace Institute, and we were just kind of brainstorming, and they said, we've done something like this in Ohio, and we've essentially tapped the market. I mean, we know what exists in Ohio. We're we're strong in terms of our supply chain in Ohio, but we know that there are manufacturers and companies throughout the Midwest and the rest of the country that could be providing support to this industry.
Mhm.
So would your region like to participate in an effort like this? And since we had this navigator group pulled together and we could really provide some heft behind what region is, and it wasn't just Coles County or Effingham County, that was very appealing to them because we already had the network in place and the human infrastructure in
Mhm.
place to be able to execute this and help them.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And you had touched on another question that came in was, why a partnership with somebody in Ohio versus somebody in Illinois, and it's just leveraging the relationships that we already had, and being able to build upon those relationships more into a regional aspect, and to try to push forward with the South Central, Southeastern Illinois as a whole, and then also recognizing that commerce for our businesses and the opportunity to participate with other manufacturers or industries. I mean, it doesn't stop at the county line. It doesn't stop at the state line either. And to reach out and utilize whatever cards are dealt, and to really go up and beyond to try to seek the best assistance, especially from a professional services standpoint, to bring to our companies to try to assist them through this process, and those that want to engage into this to really support them. So I'm glad you made that. You hit 3 questions there. So
Well,
terrific
and
job
also,
there.
just to add a little bit more to that
Yes, ma'am.
last thought, there is not an entity in Illinois that exists that mirrors what the Ohio Aerospace Institute does, for instance. They are specifically formed and located in Cleveland to be near NASA, with NASA being in Cleveland. And there's, the Ohio economy is robust in this sector. And so there are support entities and not-for-profits in Ohio that support aviation and aerospace. And also, they've been involved in training before. They even have training programs. So they're not, we're not reinventing the wheel or
Mhm.
starting from scratch with an organization that doesn't have experience and that doesn't have the history with NASA and the Air Force and the Department of Defense. We would love to work with an Illinois company in this space, but we just feel like that because they reached out to us, they've done it before, and this is their job. Let's go with the experts.
Excellent endpoint. Excellent endpoint. Zach, next question for you, sir. You had noted the employment sector for the 7-county region. There again, the Business Navigator Alliance in Cumberland County is for manufacturing is 13,430, and the healthcare sector just slightly behind it, 13,164. And definitely understand healthcare, especially from a regional aspect, as being a large employer for more rural communities, which is South Central, Southeastern Illinois. But what contributes manufacturing to be that lead employer, especially as compared to the rest of the U.S.?
Yeah, I'd have to lean on you, Courtney, since you know the region a little bit better than I do. But again, not to be presenting high level economic theory, but again, the idea of agglomeration. And so once you have momentum going and you have a collection of businesses that are established within a given industry, to a degree, until you have reached a saturation point, it makes it easier for additional businesses to come within that industry, because you have supply chains already sort of established, and you have a labor pool that's probably suitable for a different, you have people that are working in one manufacturing business that could possibly be suited to work in another manufacturing business. And so, oftentimes businesses, when they're making their location decisions, they're considering what the labor force looks like, what the local supply chains are. And so once you already kind of have the ball rolling, so to speak, in those aspects, it makes it easier and more attractive for additional businesses to come. But that's sort of the generic economic theory answer. You can fill in the specifics about you. You're far more familiar with it than I am.
I won't get into any specific details, but I really think that the culture that you find in a rural community as well, with a lot of people growing up from an agricultural background and oil and gas, and then just entrepreneurship as a whole. Is entrepreneurship spirit is strong in rural America, especially in South Central, Southeastern Illinois, where you have innovation, that opportunity to start something new, and even if you start something small, it continues to grow. And just the workforce that we have, and just the upbringing and strong school systems as well, is what you find from smaller communities that have that opportunity to really touch students and to ensure that they have a good upbringing. So I'll step off my soapbox there and continue on. Next question for you too as well, Zach. You had noted that GDP has gone down, and you had explained this a little bit, maybe just to reiterate, the GDP has gone down while employment has gone up. And so does it mean that we are producing goods with less value in this sector in general? And you had noted output per worker is 905,000 compared to 635,000 per worker nationwide, 905,000 for state of Illinois. But, are we producing less value, just more output, or is a productivity factor, or how are we noticing that GDP is going down but employment's going up?
Yeah, so I mean that would just mathematically suggest that output has gone down, right? Because if you have GDP going down with more workers, so yes, to answer in short, yes, it would suggest that output per worker has gone down. However, you're still, even with that consideration, you're still significantly higher than the national average, and that is something to consider and be sort of proud of as a region, because it's not even really like close. You have 905,000 output per worker versus 635,000 at the national level. So it also suggests that you're producing high value products within the region compared to the national average. But yeah, I guess the short answer would be yes. If we see GDP going down while employment either stays the same or goes up, then it would mathematically suggest that output per worker has gone down.
Thank you for
Now,
your answer.
the factors behind that, again, you all that are more intimately familiar with the regional economy are going to be better prepared to sort of suggest why that might be the case than someone like me, that's an outsider, so to speak. But yes, just from the numbers perspective, that seems to be what's happening.
Well, we need that number perspective to help us organize our thoughts and see what's going on with our economy to definitely justify what our assumptions are. And so very appreciative to be able to merge both boots on the ground. What are you hearing locally from your economy, but then also with data as well, and to have you present here today. So thank you for answering that question.
Sure.
We have just a minute left before we hit the 1 o'clock hour. If you do have any questions, throw them in the chat. We just have a one or two questions left, and we'll be summing up. So hopefully you can stay with us, but do recognize we're hitting close to the 1 o'clock hour. Angela, next question for you would be phase 2. You had noted a phase 2. So we are strategically gathering data now to be more of a targeted approach in introducing the aerospace industry into South Central, Southeastern Illinois. And you noted the phase 2, and hopefully a NOFO comes out maybe later this year, beginning of next year, to be able to enter that. What is phase 2? Can you elaborate a little more on that once we have this data?
Sure. So phase 2 is training and networking. Training companies in how to do business with the federal government and these agencies. And like I mentioned, that could be everything from what is a unique identifier number and how do I get one? How do I get registered at sam.gov? How do I figure out where to look for these opportunities? Where are they listed? Where are these prime contracts and subcontracts that are available? All of the training that it takes to be able to do business with these entities, and then the networking and visits. We are at the stage with OAI and Parallax and our Ohio partners that once we get the training in place, they're ready to bring procurement officers from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They work closely with the procurement office at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and bring those procurement officers to our manufacturers and our businesses once they've discovered that, this business is a good opportunity, has a good opportunity to produce this. Let's get the people there so they can see what's going on in that facility, what the skills are of the workforce in that facility, if there's going to be any training of the workforce or upgrading of skills, what will that entail? And then taking our business leaders on site to some of these entities in Ohio, on site to NASA. If you're going to make this widget for this portion of a rocket, let's go see what that looks like. And so taking people back and forth, but training and networking is phase 2. And the grants, we are under the impression, are going to be much more substantial in phase 2 to pay for that, so that businesses hopefully won't be paying out of their pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, they won't be paying out of their pocket for training, but we're hoping that we can even get enough funding that maybe we can pay for travel and, large group meetings and large training sessions here and on site in Ohio.
Well, we're definitely going to think big, and we're going to shoot for the moon, most certainly. And then, a big idea narrowed down.
I looked before the webinar today again. When this project was first announced, both phases were announced together. And, I'm sure that at that time, there was something in the announcement that said phase 2, which is implementation. Do your research, tell us what you're going to do, tell us what your program's going to be. And then, if you've done adequate research and we believe you can execute, then you can apply. Well, you can't apply, but you can apply and have the chance of being awarded the money to implement. I know at that time I read that phase 2 could have grants up over $1 million. Maybe it was 1 to 2 million. I can't find anything like that anymore. And they haven't announced phase 2 yet. The NOFO has not been issued, but we're hoping if it is similar to that first announcement, that there will be substantial funding available to help pay for all of that.
Fingers crossed, most certainly. And love that you touched on the point of, training for business leaders, but then also the possibility of a skills gap, especially if somebody's pivoting or retooling or may not be in this industry now, that may be a gap in the need for additional training for their workforce as well. So really, what this is doing is through the implementation stage, phase 2, if you would agree here, is positioning our businesses to be successful for those that want to try to take advantage of this opportunity. Awesome. The final question that we have, and maybe you kind of identified that a little bit, Angela, but what do our businesses do now to try to help them prepare? So say that somebody is willing to be creative and push its limits, and just understandable right now, it's still an interesting environment that we are in, an interesting economy that we're in with high interest rates, very tight labor markets. Sometimes businesses right now are just really trying to survive, not only financially, but just from a product from their product standpoint too, and the need to grow and not having those resources now. If they're looking to try to take advantage of this opportunity to expand their business too, what do they need to be doing now? I mean, effectively, they don't have a business plan for this, and we're in the R&D section, but how can they be prepared to enter hopefully phase 2?
I think the first thing is, if you haven't been contacted by someone with a development consortium within the next 3 weeks, reach out to one of us and let us know you want to be included in this data gathering stage, and we can get you involved in that. And then the second thing, I guess, is just, maybe in your mind's eye or in some kind of a spreadsheet, begin an inventory of what are the skills that your employees have, what are the products you're producing, which lines could be modified easily. If you're in the production of hoses, are those process lines easily adaptable to, a different kind of a hose? So maybe just kind of begin an inventory, written or otherwise, of what you're currently doing and what you think is easily adaptable and what the skill sets are that support those activities. That's the kind of information they're going to want as they try to
Yes.
match make with opportunities in the supply chain.
Thank you, Angela. And Zach, the last question that I had came in. I skipped it, but for the sake of asking everybody's question that comes in, you did touch on it during your presentation. It came in a little early. It was talking towards the wages, and specifically the wages of average wage here for our region versus the nation, 61,579 in my notes for our region versus 79,421 nationwide. And the question was, are we missing out? What's going on? And definitely in seeing those two different numbers. And you had noted, a big contributor there potentially is the cost of living. Do you want to elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, sure. So of course, employers are going to want to minimize labor costs, obviously, because that's a direct cost that's going to affect their bottom line. And so to the extent that they can, pay enough to have a nice living wage, because the cost of living in the area is lower with regards to housing, transportation costs, that sort of a thing. That's probably explaining why we don't see the wages at the national level. You get in some other regions of the country, housing is just so incredibly expensive that manufacturers have to pay their employees higher wages just so that they can, make ends meet, so to speak. So I think that probably explains a lot of it. It's just that, the cost of living in the region is lower than the national average. But I think, it's a good sign to see that trend of growth. Even though we're lower than the national average within the region, the average annual year-over-year growth was more rapid over the past 10 years for the region than it was for the nation. So that's, encouraging.
Thank you for re-elaborating and touching on those points. And with that, we will conclude the Q&A section for today's webinar. A big heartfelt thank you to Angela and Zach for presenting today, for educating us, and to the Business Navigator Alliance of South Central, Southeastern Illinois as a whole for participating in this. I really enjoyed today's presentation. I really enjoyed the discussing the regional initiatives that we have to try to introduce the aerospace industry into South Central, Southeastern Illinois, and then Zach, coming back and presenting to us again and letting us know how crucial of a role that manufacturing does play within our regional economy. So again, and again, thank you kindly for educating us. We much appreciate you guys today. Would let everybody know the recording for this should go out. If you did register, you will get a copy of this recording in your inbox by Wednesday next week, and then it will be on the website for the ilbusinessnavigators.com. We hope that you join us next month in October, last Thursday of October 26th, where we will investigate building a workforce pipeline with migrant workers, with refugees or second chance employees, and along with trying to build that pipeline, what resources are there to help support this demographic. So looking forward to that one as well. Hope you join us October 26th, the last Thursday of October. We hope that you enjoyed today's presentation and that you found it informative, and to want to wish everybody a good rest of your day. Thank you.